Welcome to KMET 1490 AM ABC News Radio and the Southern California Business Report with Yvette Walker, a show dedicated to highlighting successful Southern California businesses and the people behind them.
Welcome and thank you for joining Southern California Business Report on ABC News and Talks, KMET 1490 AM, 98.1 FM, and KMET TV. I'm Yvette Walker, live blasting our signal from the center of Southern California, serving a population of over 25 million. Get us crystal clear and on demand by downloading the free live streaming app on Google Play and the Apple App Store. As always, a huge shout out to the team. Mitch, Bill, and Sean, I love you guys. And to our special advisory committee that can be found at www.scbrtalk/advisorycommittee.com. Okay, everybody, I am so thrilled and honored to finally have the opportunity to introduce Mr. Jesse Melgar. He is the Senior Advisory for Strategy and Public Affairs at the University of California Possibility Lab. After serving as Senior Advisor and Director of Engagement for California 100 at the UC Berkeley Goldman School of Public Policy. Prior to this role, Jesse worked in state government for nearly a decade, most recently serving as Communications Director and Press Secretary for California Governor Gavin Newsom during the unprecedented crisis of the COVID-19 pandemic. He previously led communications for United States Senator Alex Padilla during his first term as California Secretary of State, Insurance Commissioner Ricardo Lara during his tenure as State Senator, the California Latino Legislative Caucus, and Equality California. Jesse is a vice chair of the Inland Empire Community Foundation, where he is the founder and chair of the Cultivating Inland Empire Latino Opportunity Fund, also known as the Cielo Fund. The Cielo Fund has raised nearly $2 million to support grants, research, scholarships, and narrative change campaigns for Latinos in the Inland Empire. He is currently an advisory board member for the UC Riverside School of Public Policy and Equality California. In 2021, Governor Newsom appointed Jesse to the California Volunteers Commission, where he serves as vice chair and advocated for Inland Empire colleges and universities to receive millions in state funding for the new California Volunteers College Corps program. He previously served on the boards of the Honor PAC Political Action Committee and Planned Parenthood of the Pacific Southwest. He earned his bachelor's degree with dual majors in political science and Chicano studies from the UCLA and his master of public policy from the UCR of Public Policy as a member of the inaugural cohort and recipient of a full tuition merit scholarship. In 2023, he was recognized as an inaugural Bruin Excellence Civic Engagement honoree from UCLA, and in 2024 received the Young Alumni of the Year Award from UCR. Thank you so much for being with us today, Jesse.
Thank you for having me, Yvette. Appreciate it. And what a long bio. Thank you for reading that.
You've done a lot. You look so young, right? So thank you so much for being with us. I know you're so busy, but as you know, my first question to each of my guests is to please walk us through your journey. Quite the bio there. I know today we're going to be really highlighting your work at the Possibility Lab and the Cielo Fund. So please share a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, thank you again, Yvette, for having me. And I think my journey begins here in the Inland Empire, kind of where I'm at today. So in some ways, it's a full circle. But I'm very proud to be from this region, born in San Bernardino, raised in Riverside, son of a Salvadoran immigrant, a Mexican-American mother, first and only person in my family to go to college, thanks to the sacrifices of my parents. And when I was in college, I really wanted to understand how government can work better for people who aren't usually included in conversations. And so I pursued political science, got a job, as you noted, in my bio, working in state government for nearly a decade, working for some of California's top leaders. And as you noted, for my last stint in government was during COVID-19. So was a privilege and quite a big lift to be the press secretary and comms director for Governor Newsom during that time. You might remember those daily updates we would give, providing just real-time updates to the state of California about what was happening. And so when I left state service back in 2021, I had put a lot of the things that passion projects and other things that I wanted to do on hold. And so suddenly I found that I had time, and I had started a job and had been there since at the University of California, Berkeley Goldman School of Public Policy. And so I wanted to figure out how could I use the skills that I had developed in government. I was a communications professional. I got my master's, as you noted, in public policy from UC Riverside. So I wanted to see how I can use that interesting mix of experience and education and network that I had built over the span of my career so far to advance the issues that I really care about. And so that work led me to, in my volunteer capacity, joining the Inland Empire Community Foundation Board of Directors, recruited by Paulette Brown-Hines, who's a good friend and mentor, Michelle Decker, who's the president of the foundation. And one of the first things I asked them was, how do we continue to grow the foundation so that we can, ensure that communities throughout the region are included in leadership, including the initiatives that we run. And so through the support of our board, through the support of our president and our board chair at the time, we were able to launch the Cielo Fund. And as you noted, it's a long acronym. I'm a communications person, so part of what we do is tell stories. And I wanted the name to really inspire, but also to say what our mission was, which was to cultivate Inland Empire Latino opportunity. And so that spells out Cielo, which for your Spanish-speaking guests might know, means sky or heaven in Spanish. And so it's aspirational. And it really gets to what we're trying to do, which is to support Latino organizations in the region, to fund scholarships for students in the region, to support research to better understand the issues in our community throughout the region, and also to rewrite the narrative a little bit. I mean, some of the work you do and that others do throughout the region to really uplift stories about our community are important, and so we invest in those as well. So that's kind of a mix of how I got here, and in my day job, as I brushed over, but I know we'll get into in a minute, proud to serve the last 3.5 years as a senior advisor at the Goldman School of Public Policy, where we work with several departments and agencies and organizations across the state.
Absolutely. And that's exactly where I was going with my next question. Please talk about how your role at Cal State Berkeley interfaces with your role at the Possibility Lab.
Yeah, part of how I think about my work and everything I just described is there's not really a term that kind of encapsulates all of the work that I try and do, but one that comes close is this idea of civic entrepreneurship. And civic entrepreneurship is really about taking social challenges and turning those into opportunities for innovation and for community growth. And so the mentality of a civic entrepreneur is one of, thinking about how do we use innovation to empower communities to solve public problems. And so when I was looking at what I could do post-government service, I was, exploring what entities, what institutes, what universities are doing really transformative work, and the policy school at Berkeley was one of them that really rose to the top. And so since my time at the Goldman School, I've been at the lab for a few years, and what we do is really work with state departments and agencies to do better outreach to communities. A lot of time what we find is that research without action is really empty, right? I think at the Possibility Lab, what we try and do is turn knowledge into a weapon for real policy change. We try and think about how can we work in partnership with our state departments and agencies, with our research partners, to really think about how they can improve service delivery, how they can innovate on providing services, providing policy solutions. And so a lot of what we do, it's a little messy, it's a little different, it's a little unique, but that's part of the secret sauce about what makes our lab and our work really unique. And our lab is led by Dr. Amy Lerman, who's a professor of political science and public policy at UC Berkeley, a phenomenal leader, innovative leader in public policy work, former associate dean of the school. And so she really challenges all of us to think through how do we identify those partnerships where change and innovation can happen, and how do we bring along some of our partners who are interested in that kind of approach to some public policy solutions.
Right. And so you mentioned the research part of it being a messy part, right? So you're drawing all of this data from various sources. Jesse, please talk about those themes of research that you kind of encapsulate, that you put an eye on to focus and to really dig into delivering the research to give those public policy makers to implement those meaningful transformations.
Yeah, it's so unique. It really depends on the client and kind of what they're bringing, what problems they're bringing to the table to solve. And we are a lab that is half practitioner, so half people like me who come from government and have that experience, and then half people who are academics and researchers full time. And so that mix is really interesting, because then we can approach problem solving from different levels. But I'll give you some examples of what we do at the lab. So we run 3 initiatives. One is called Firsthand Framework for Policy Innovation, and it looks at really elevating those closest to policy problems and advancing policy solutions. So oftentimes we know that there's people in rooms in Sacramento and other parts of government that don't always include the people who are the most impacted by these problems. So we want to flip that script a bit and think about how do we center those community experiences. We also have an initiative looking at how do we build an abundance agenda in California. So rather than think about things like housing and energy and other things in short supply, what does it mean to build more of the essential things that people need to succeed? So that's our Abundance Accelerator work. And then we have something called the Cal Engage Initiative, which is really thinking about how do we reform how government reaches community through trusted messenger networks. And we saw a lot of this, for example, during the census work back in 2010, and then during COVID, right, when I was in the governor's office and others who've continued that work. One of the things that made public education so effective was making sure that we had organizations who partnered with us to be part of the solution, to help co-design how we communicated with folks, to help co-design the messaging that we used in real time. And so part of what we're trying to do is build a framework around how that could look in practice long term. We're building a toolkit, we're writing a white paper, we'll be releasing in a few months, and then we want government to use it. We want them to hopefully start testing some of the ideas that we have in theory and then do that in practice. And last thing I'll say on kind of how the lab approaches this work is we are interested in solving problems as quickly as we can. A lot of research happens in a vacuum or in silos, or a lot of research happens to produce reports that a lot of academic peer folks will read, but doesn't really go out into the ether, into community, or into the general public. We're trying to approach it a little bit different. We want to concern ourselves with those problems that we can research now, find solutions to now, publish reports now, and hopefully in the immediate or not too distant future, that can start having an impact on public policy in the state.
So with that said, Jesse, please talk about those intersection points between, the community, education, and public policy, and how you're able to identifying those overlapping needs and focus to really cultivate a meaningful solution moving forward.
Yeah, I think one of a few examples come to mind, particularly for your listeners here in Southern California. While we're based at Berkeley, we are a statewide lab. I am a resident of the Inland Empire and do a lot of work out here. Some of the things we talked about, like the Cielo Fund, like the Inland Empire Community Foundation, I've been able to bring some collaborations to fruition over the past few years. So one example is one that we launched last week, actually. So in partnership with the Inland Empire Community Foundation and the Possibility Lab, we were able to produce a report on that looked at how Inland Empire Latino voters experience accessing basic resources and goods. And so, Latino Heritage Month is a time where we all talk about, celebrating the Latino community, uplifting the Latino community. I would argue that that's something we need to do year round, all the time, because it's important. Our contributions as a community are immense and are year round. But this is when a lot of folks pay attention. And so part of what we try and do is be strategic. So we're saying, okay, if this is when we have the attention of a lot of individuals who don't traditionally uplift Latino narratives or experiences, let's use data to tell a story. And so through this report, between the Possibility Lab, IECF, and the Berkeley Institute for Governmental Studies, we surveyed about 230 Inland Empire Latino voters. And we asked them 12 questions, and they focused on the things you might think they would focus on. So how difficult is it for you to access housing? How difficult is it for you to access energy, elder care, child care, some of the things that are tabletop issues for a lot of communities right now, and particularly folks who are struggling. And so what we found was pretty interesting, and it's consistent with what we all hear, right? So the top issue, you might guess, would be housing. So about 80% of people who took the survey said that they had difficulty finding housing at a price they can afford. About 63 and 65% said elder care and child care, which is an interesting thing from a data perspective, because the Inland Empire, as you and I know, Yvette, is largely growing Latino community, but it's also a young Latino community. So currently we're 52% Latino in Riverside and San Bernardino counties. Based on a report we commissioned last year with USC, we're looking to be 74% by 2050. So the community is going to grow pretty significantly in the coming years. And so if you have a booming population of Latinos who are younger, then what are the two issues that are pretty significant? Well, one is you become parents, right? More often than not, younger folks start families, they start to have kids. Simultaneously, they then have to take care of aging parents. So what our poll found, not surprisingly, is that 63, the number 2 and 3, or maybe 3 and 4, forgive me, issues were elder care and child care, which means if you're a growing Latino community, you're taking care of your kids and you're taking care of your parents, those costs add up, as those of us who do both know. And so so that's one example of how we approach this work, and how I approach as a practitioner this idea of civic entrepreneurship. We're using data to pull in the experiences of community. Then we're using that data to tell a story, like I just did, about what the experiences might be. And the great thing about this is that's a perfect example of how we change narratives in the region. So we use that data, and it got covered in many of our mainstream Inland Empire publications, Desert Sun, SoCal News Group, and others. And so it's just really exciting that for the first time, we're able to help shape how stories are told, but also to uplift, both the good and the bad, right? It's about talking about the good things in our community and the positive things and all the amazing contributions, but also talking about some of the challenges that our community face, because I think both are important. And not just talking about them, but getting that information, that data in front of the people who can actually do something about it. Because as I noted, data is great, but if data doesn't come with action, then what's the point? And so part of what we do then is we put it in front of lawmakers, we put it in front of their staffs, and we hope to, as they're making decisions about these different policy issue areas, they'll be able to influence changes that impact and benefit the community.
Absolutely wonderful. So tell us about the role of the Cielo Fund. Now that you've gone through the process of accumulating data that speaks to, the barriers that the Latino community faces and ways to overcome them and to support the Latino community. You mentioned housing, elder care, child care. And how is it that, walk us through the process of building a whole new program, a whole new entity to find the solutions, to implement them. And, then we'll go over some of those programs that are a part of your partnerships to deliver those programs and support systems throughout the region.
Yeah, it's a good question. And one of the things that I should start by saying, the Cielo Fund is only 2 years old. We're celebrating our 2-year anniversary in October. And I'm just so proud of how much impact it's shown in the last few years. And that is all possible because of our incredible leadership committee, who includes Latino leaders throughout the region, all of our partners. And ultimately, it's about our nonprofits, who are really the ones doing the work. What we saw was a gap in a philanthropic strategy for the Latino community here. So we had things like representation, right? So we have a few assembly members, senators, and others across the board who identify as Latino, who are getting elected to office. We have art institutions like the Cheech Marine Center for Chicano Art and Culture, where in Riverside is now the hub for Chicano art in the country, arguably. We have Hispanic serving institutions like UC Riverside and Cal State San Bernardino, who are really hubs for educating the next generation of leaders. What we didn't have, based on our analysis through our foundation at IACF and just talking to different groups, was that there was no Latino philanthropic strategy. So the Cielo Fund really was born out of that need and born to fill that gap. And that's what we've tried to do. So the Cielo Fund, we operate on a grant cycle. In the 2 years we've been around, we've raised nearly $2 million, which we're super, super proud of. Our initial goal out of the gate was $80,000, and we weren't sure how we were going to get there and what it was going to be, but we knew that we had to do something. We couldn't just complain about there being no strategy. We had to help create it ourselves, which is what I love about the Inland Empire. I think there's some really interesting innovation happening in this region, and such incredible leaders. And so we did, and we built it out, and all the partnerships that we talked about are now moving forward. And so we've been just so proud of what has happened. But more importantly, we have touched so many organizations through that work. We've granted out about nearly $1 million in all of our programs. So we funded 56 grants to 56 Latino-led or serving organizations. That includes media partnerships. That includes research partnerships. It includes scholarships. Our scholarships is kind of the one, if you want, for those who've come to our event, we have one coming up on October 6th in Palm Springs. Tickets still available, shameless plug. But we get to talk to and hear from our scholarship recipients. And it's personal to me because when I was in high school at John W. North in Riverside, I actually got a scholarship from the Inland Empire Community Foundation. And that's how I first heard about IECF. And that was back in, don't want to age myself here, but back in 2005 when I was a high school senior. And I was the first in my family to go to college. I had no idea what it meant. I got into UCLA, went to UCLA. I'm a proud Bruin. And now here I am, some number of years later, as a board member and vice chair of the same foundation that gave me one of my first scholarships to go to college. And now I'm the founder of the CLO Fund, which helps kids with my background, Latino kids who may not know how they're paying for college, may not know, they can't pick up the phone and ask an older aunt or uncle because they might be first generation. And so they are the ones setting that barrier or breaking those barriers. And so for me, that piece is so powerful. And in the 2 years that we've been around, we've been able to fund about 150 scholarships to local Latino students who attend local IE colleges and universities. And we have one additional thing that makes us a little different, which is we ask them to pledge to stay local. So it's one thing to help fund an education. And then we all know people want to leave home or do, which I support. I've left home for a little bit, but ideally we want to build up the infrastructure for our region. And part of what we think, symbolically, if nothing else, is to say, yeah, we'll give you the scholarship dollars. You get $1,000 to $3,000 depending, but we hope that you'll stay in the region, and we hope that you'll bring those skills that you have, the education that you're gaining, and put that to good use for the region, so that we can continue to build up as for the years to come. So we're really excited about all of the impact that the different streams of work that we fund has had, and we're excited to see where it goes.
Absolutely. So receiving that scholarship was obviously a turning point in your life and resonated very deeply to the point where you're here today. Please talk about that moment, when you received that scholarship and how you even learned of it, because a lot of times mentors are a huge part of, our educational process. And I would imagine you had a fantastic mentor that put this on your radar and said, hey, Jesse, there are scholarships available. Here's one through IECF. And that moment when you did receive that scholarship, please talk about that.
Yeah, it's a good question. You're taking me back here, Yvette. It's been a while since I've really honed in on it. So, so I was a senior in high school, and I knew that I was interested in government and wanting to learn more about government. My dad was an immigrant. He became a citizen, and I just saw how that becoming a citizen of the U.S. just transformed his whole life. He started voting. I watched him vote, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. Like, what is this? So I knew that's what I wanted to study, but I didn't know how I was going to pay for it. And I didn't have any siblings. I was the youngest in my family, first to go to college. I had a few cousins who had gone to college but wasn't very close to them. So I had a guidance counselor, haven't talked to him in years, but Mr. Flores at John W. North High School in Riverside. And he connected me. He had this is back in the day, so they had a list on a few pieces of paper printed out of these are the scholarships available to everyone. And he would encourage not just me, but all the folks in his cohort to apply for all of them. So I did and got it. And I remember, they would have financial aid nights in high schools, and my dad and I would go, and we weren't really sure, how we're going to pay for it. And then we saw the price tags of some of these colleges, and we're like, okay, we definitely can't afford that. And I remember a really powerful story, our conversation that I had with my dad around that time, which was, we were talking about it, had gotten into UCLA, I was very excited to go. And I'm like, okay, this is before we understood how financial aid really works. We're like, we got to figure out how we're going to do this. And he tells me, he's like, mijo, I have $5,000 saved up. We're going to get you through the first quarter, and then we're going to figure the rest out. And so for me, that was kind of my okay, I'm going to start it. It's become a theme in my life where I kind of lean into things, not really sure how they're going to end, or not really sure, you kind of take the leap of faith without seeing the next step in some ways. So we did it. I got a lot of financial aid help. I got several scholarships thanks to Mr. Flores and others in the Inland Empire. I got some scholarships from UCLA, and so I was able to graduate with no debt with my undergrad degree thanks to that. But I worked 3 jobs while I was in school. As a resident assistant, I had an office job. I was in student government, which paid for partial tuition. So I was able to really help my family, and I just worked that. But yeah, that was my introduction to it. And I remember being a high school senior, going to those scholarship receptions and getting that certificate, and you see $500 or $1,000, and it's the most money you've ever seen in your life up until that point. And it adds up. And I think going into my first year with all the scholarships I had, it was close to $25,000 in in scholarships. So I was like, I got to buy a laptop because I need that for school and all these other things. So yeah, it's just incredible to think about experience for me, and just to think about all the kids who, we hope that, we've had 2 events now for the Cielo Fund. We have our next event coming up, and you could just see how meaningful it is for a lot of these kids holding that piece of paper. We also acknowledge the parents because we know that no kid gets there alone. And so it's just really powerful. It's a powerful experience for us to see how impactful it is for the students. And again, like I said, it's personal for me, and it reminds me of my experience back when I was in high school.
Thank you so much for sharing that. We are coming up on a break, Jesse. All right, everybody. Yvette Walker with ABC News and Talk, Southern California Business Report, here with Jesse Melgar, dynamic leader and visionary, serving as a senior advisor for strategy and public affairs at the esteemed Possibility Lab, University of California, with a passion for driving positive change and fostering innovation. When we return.
The University of Laverne is rated first in California for alumni satisfaction. Learn more about accelerated programs offered online and on campus in Laverne, Irvine, Ontario, Burbank, or College of the Canyons. Visit go.laverne.edu. The University of Laverne. go.laverne.edu.
Hi, I'm Dana Rademacher with MGR Property Management.
A lot of people wonder about the value that property management has for their property. Property management can include all property types, including residential, commercial, and HOA. It is valuable because property managers are experienced in what can happen at your property. We're aware of liabilities. We're able to do predictive and preventative maintenance. We know what is coming up with the changes in the weather, the seasons, how old certain aspects or different capital projects at your property are. We're able to best negotiate contract pricing, legalities with your tenants, and anything else that you may need to ensure that you're getting the full value of the property.
If you're interested in speaking with the representative at MGR Property Management regarding your property management needs, you can visit our website at mgrrealestate.com, or you can call our number at area code 909-581-6600 to be connected with the representative.
Cal State San Bernardino is home to the only School of Entrepreneurship in California. With globally ranked degree programs, you can start your journey today to become a successful entrepreneur. Learn more and connect at entre.csusb.edu.
Hi, I'm San Bernardino County Sheriff Shannon Dykes. If you're looking to start an exciting career in law enforcement and make a difference in your community, we are hiring dispatchers, nurses, deputies, laterals, and many more. For a complete list of our jobs and more information, visit sheriffsjobs.com.
Ontario International Airport is onto a better way to fly with over 65 daily non-stop flights to more than 20 major destinations and the easiest airport experience in Southern California. Visit flyonto.com/Ontario to learn more about Ontario International Airport today.
We are the Empire Strikers, the professional sports team of the Inland Empire. We are a fast-actioned and community-inspired pro indoor soccer team. Our mission is to inspire the Empire. Home games, community events, watch parties, and youth camps are all back. Professional indoor soccer is back. Join us and come watch the greatest show on turf at Toyota Arena or on Twitch. Visit www.theempirestrikers.com for more and any information.
Welcome back, everyone. Yvette Walker with ABC News and Talk, Southern California Business Report, here with the Jesse Melgar, dynamic leader and visionary, serving as a senior advisor for strategy and public affairs of the esteemed Possibility Lab, University of California, with a passion for driving positive change and fostering innovation, in this case, the Inland Empire. Thank you again for being with us today, Jesse.
Thank you for having me, Yvette. It's been fun.
Perfect. So prior to the break, you were sharing a little bit about your experience that transformed your view of the world and created this mission of yours that you're now pursuing with great purpose through the Cielo Fund. Prior to the break, we talked about its mission, but I know that you have conducted recent research. Please talk about that recent research and the issues that it's aimed to address.
Yeah, thank you for asking, and it's a good question that kind of again, lives at the intersection of my day job, my volunteer work and community work. So I talked briefly about the poll that we ran that looked at IE Latino voters and their responses. One of the projects that we're currently working on with the Possibility Lab is also focused here on the Inland Empire, is with Todec Legal Center. So they're an organization that supports farm workers, warehouse workers, service workers throughout the region. They have offices in Victorville, in the city of Paris, and in the city of Coachella. And we, through our lab's work, we have one of our initiatives, which is called the Firsthand Framework, which again looks at those closest to the problems, being able to identify solutions. And so we thought, okay, a lot of conversations we have about health really exclude certain segments of our population. One of those happens to be, farm workers. These are individuals who work really laborious jobs, really meaningful, hard jobs to make sure that all of us have food on our table and that we can feed our families. But very rarely are they asked how they're doing, or very rarely are they looked at as far in terms of, what are their health outcomes. And so what this framework does, and it's being led by some of my colleagues, Naomi Levy, who's a professor at Santa Clara University and an affiliate with the Possibility Lab, Fiorella, who's on her team, Rosaline, who's on her team, who've done the research. I'm big on giving the researchers their shine as well. They came for a few months here to the Inland Empire in Coachella Valley. They worked in partnership with Todec. They co-designed this training to really ask farm workers themselves, how do you, as a farm worker, define health? And so what we do is we hold focus groups. I think there was about 10 or so focus groups held in each of the 3 locations in community. Our researchers train the Todec staff because these are folks that are comfortable with the farm workers, and farm workers are comfortable with them. So rather than it being, Berkeley coming in and saying, we're going to study you, and we don't believe in that model necessarily. So we train the trainer and co-facilitate a lot of these workshops. And what we found is that, health is commonly thought of in terms of things like, what's your cholesterol level? How many times are you going to the doctor? And those are valid. But what we were looking at is, as a farm worker, what are the indicators that they use to determine whether or not they're healthy? And it was interesting, still combing through the data, but there were about 600 indicators sourced. And things like being able to pay rent is an indicator of health because there's a mental health component associated with not being able to pay rent. Having housing is an indicator of health. A lot of times when you're low income or very low income and work is seasonal, and if the weather doesn't agree with you, then you might be out of work. How you're putting a roof over your family's head becomes a health impediment. And so what this report we hope will do is look at how farm workers are experiencing health themselves from a different lens, really centering community voice, really centering farm worker, service worker, warehouse worker experiences, and uplifting, what they had to say, with the goal, again, a lot of what our work is about is hopefully influencing and changing public policy. So with the hope that they can present the findings through our report, through a mini documentary that we're going to release as part of it, the study, and get in front of the right decision makers to hopefully change policy and meet them where they are with solutions. So that's one of the really exciting examples of how the lab is approaching research, how we're going in community, how we're rethinking what a university research center could be, and not, you have to come to us at our university or our campus. We want to really go out into community because that's where we think the most effective change happens.
So please talk about where the major deficiencies are when you conducted those studies for farm workers and labor workers.
Yeah, again, I think it's things like housing. It's things like economic themes seem to be most prevalent. So issues relating to just financial health became part of physical health. And we had one individual talk about her husband, having such a hard time being able to pay their bills that he left them and wasn't able to help, and he just couldn't figure out how to save face with his family. And so there's just really heartbreaking stories like that. And what we forget, I think, through a lot of the stories we hear, through a lot of the data we read, you open the paper or read the news on any given day and you hear about different data points, right? we really forget the humanity behind each of those data points. You forget the stories, you forget the people, the families. Each of us is so enthralled in our own lives and are so consumed by our own screens that we don't necessarily always think about those around us, or those who are doing that really hard work to make sure that our lives are not hard, or able to live in peace. And so part of this framework, the firsthand framework for policy innovation that we're running at the lab, is thinking about that from that lens. We did another report in Oakland that looked at public safety, for example, and it wasn't looking at public safety in terms of number of crimes committed or number of cars broken into. Again, those things you can find pretty much anywhere. What we were looking at is, if you live in a community that is challenged by crime rate or crime statistics, what other forms of indicators do you think about when you think about safety? And they looked at things like having a grocery store within walking distance is an indicator of safety. Having kids playing in a park in our community is an indicator of safety. Having elders in our community sitting on their porch and getting to know their neighbors is an indicator of safety. So it really changes a little bit about how we think about these large issue areas that all these politicians and other folks talk about, and really puts a human experience and a real experience and lived experience behind each of them.
So going back to the farm workers, as well as the labor workers, please talk about those solutions that have been identified. If you can share it with us, and maybe some strategies that you have developed to start moving the needle.
Yeah, so one of the things we're looking at is, how do we get the findings in front of the right individuals who can make change? So that's not only elected officials and policymakers, it's also philanthropy. It's also individuals who are part of major foundations who can invest into communities, into organizations that are traditionally underinvested, right? When I think about the work of the Cielo Fund and the lab in general, I think about how our region is constantly overlooked, but that we really are a driving force for innovation and culture and economic power. But it really takes us having these conversations and that data to really help tell the story. So what we hope to do through this work is, we're not advocating for specific policy changes, right? Like, I think we'll have recommendations that come out, but what we hope it does is it empowers our partners to do that on their own. So I know that, like, TODEC has several pieces of legislation they're looking at that look at things like unemployment insurance. Some farm workers pay into it, but don't necessarily benefit from it, for example. So there's things like that I think each different CBO, community-based organization that we partner with can use the data as a tool. And that's what we love about it. It's actionable data. It's actionable research, where our community organizations, our community partners are empowered to take that, use the findings to advance their political objectives, their policy objectives. And that's what it is. I mean, one of the things people forget about the University of California, and California State University for that matter, is, for the research institutions, all of our research is public, right? Like, this is a public service. It's a public good that people have access to. So, I was fortunate to get my master's in public policy from UC Riverside as a member of the first cohort. And so there's some really good research happening at UCR as well for this region. So, part of our charge is, we're not consultants. We don't do that work. We are a public university. We're a public research institution, and our product belongs to the people of California, and that includes our research.
Jesse, please talk about those nearly 60 grantees that have received funds from the Cielo Fund. Talk about, give us a cross section. What is it? What do they look like? What is the work that they're doing in the community, and how can we identify them?
Yeah, and we have been very intentional about how we approach the Cielo Fund's work. We're mindful of criticism, right? Like, I think we are new. We don't claim to have it all figured out of the gate. We're 2 years in and still learning, still adjusting how we approach our work. But we are really proud of the fact that we have had about 150, 160 total applications submitted for review. We've only been able to support 56, but that again just shows the need for an effort like the Cielo Fund. And those that we did fund, we were very intentional about making sure they were regionally diverse, right? So we have through our last 2 years, folks as far as Blythe, for example, from the foundation's offices, to Victorville, to Coachella, to Moreno Valley. I mean, we have a truly diverse, geographically at least, group of folks who have applied and have received funding from the Cielo Fund. We adjusted our criteria recently. So we are funding organizations that are $500,000 operating budgets or smaller. And part of that was feedback from community. So one of the things in our first grant round was saying, hey, like there's a lot of organizations that are bigger that also get support from larger foundations. And Cielo Fund can really fill a gap by being that backfill, if you will, for the smaller groups who are just starting out. And so we adjusted, we heard the suggestions, and we agreed. We're like, yeah, we could be kind of that fund that supports the smaller groups as they're starting out. So this grant cycle for 2024 did just that. We looked at smaller organizations. We looked at incubating some of these ones that are just starting out, or ones that have been around for a while but are still, under that $500,000 operating. And it's great. I mean, we have organizations that do, legal services for farm workers. We have organizations that help students with special needs. We have organizations that are, telling stories through, like the Civil Rights Institute of Inland Southern California is one of them, who's like starting a Latinx leadership program to help train high school students on how to tell the civil rights history of our communities. And so it just really runs a gambit. There's healthcare organizations, there's advocacy organizations. We have mariachi organizations who are doing incredible work. One of the groups that will perform at our event is Herencia Mariachi, which is a Corona-based mariachi academy. And they train kids how to be mariachi so that the cultural education is passed on from generation to generation. So we're really just excited. I mean, it does not feel like work at all. It's a lot of hours spent reading these applications, but I'll tell you that it is so incredible just to read the passion that a lot of these organizations have, the dedication to their communities, the dedication to culture, the dedication to really advancing, not just the Latino community, because one of the things I emphasize is this: when our community as the largest, population in this region succeeds, the entire region succeeds. And so what we're hoping to do is not just invest in our organizations that identify as Latino, but what the work that they do will impact everyone regardless of how you identify. So we're excited about just the momentum that has launched, the people that we've been able to support, the visionaries of the organization. And these are grassroots groups who don't often get the attention that they need. And I think it's just incredible to watch them continue to grow, and us being a really, really small part of that growth.
Absolutely. And as we were talking about off air is, identifying those best kept secrets, those gems to our communities, and revealing them to the community and empowering them to do the work to serve their community, build their community, and realize a better future.
Absolutely.
Jesse, please talk about the upcoming event, who can join, and what guests can expect.
Absolutely. So we are, it's our third event, but our second anniversary event. We had a launch event. That was our first day technically launching, but we have our anniversary event coming up Sunday, October 6th, in Palm Springs at the Palm Springs Convention Center. It's a brunch celebration celebrating our grantees, our scholarship recipients, our media partners, and others. And we expect about 250 community groups, or representatives from community attending. Half of those will be scholarship recipients and their parents. So folks who are new to the Cielo Fund, who don't really know what we're about, but are getting a scholarship, so they're going to come learn about the work. And part of what we do at these events, and I know you've been to one, thank you for coming, is we have a little bit of an educational component. You can tell I'm a little bit of a nerd and a little bit of a policy wonk. So we have the fun. Exactly. We have the celebration, we have the fun, but we do also use it as an opportunity to share some of the data that I've just shared with you about the community. So that it's, yes, it's fun, it's celebration, it's exciting, but it's also, informative, we hope. But it's going to be a big celebration. Every year it gets bigger, which we're so stoked about. We have special guests coming this year, including some of our local assembly members. We have videos that we produce. We have a partnership. One of my passions is art, and so we have a partnership with the Cheech Marin Center for Chicano Art and Culture and the Riverside Art Museum, where we're going to give away some special art prints for folks to take as recuerdos from the event. We also partnered with an artist from the Eastside Art House in Riverside to do screen printing at the event, so you can actually show up and screen print your own piece of fine art as part of educating about culture. We have our IECF also has a journalism and media hub, and so we have invited my colleague Paulette Brown-Hines, who's the chair of that hub, and they're going to have a booth there and do interviews of some of the attendees, because they're working on how to do what you're doing, Yvette, which is like improve local media, improve media overall for the region. So we're really trying to make it an interactive experience this year, which is a little different, and really try and make it a memorable experience where you come, you eat, you have a good time, you network, but you also get to do some really interactive pieces as well.
Absolutely. And the analytics are key, right? The analytics are what you need to measure how progress is being realized and how those dollars being invested are actually doing what they're supposed to do. So earlier in the conversation, Jesse, we talked about the narrative. Please share what that narrative push is for the Cielo Fund today.
Yeah, I think we start from the premise, and this is both true for the Cielo Fund and the Inland Empire Community Foundation. We start from the premise that our region, we're more than just 2 counties and a collection of cities. Like, we are a powerhouse of culture, a powerhouse of resilience and potential. Part of what happens in our regions is that the folks who are not from the region cover our region externally and then shape it based on what they think they know about the region. And you know this better than anyone as someone who tries to do the opposite of that, which is tell really positive local stories. So part of the thing that we want to do, one of the things we want to do is really flip the script on that and say, yes, we have our challenges. Every region has its challenges, right? We're not naive to those. But there's also something really special happening here in the Inland Empire. I mean, if you just look around, not just our grantees, but the nonprofit infrastructure here and the nonprofit leadership here is incredible. It's having national implications, statewide implications. And so what we're trying to do is really uplift those stories, really talk about through original programming that we help fund with KVCR, for example, through other programs that partnerships that we have with the SoCal News Group, La Opinión, the Latino Media Collaborative. We have a new one that we're going to announce at the event that's a statewide publication. We have ongoing partnerships with the Desert Sun. What our goal is with all these partnerships is say, okay, we will grant out to these entities, funding to support their operations. But the caveat is we want you to cover positive stories about the Latino community. Now, we don't have editorial control. We don't want editorial control. It's not what we do. But at least planting the seed that can hopefully blossom into positive stories. And I can just say for some of the partnerships that well, we've seen just the impact of that just grow over the last few years. And just having a lot of our partners get interviewed for the first time, who have never been in a news studio or a radio studio and actually have a conversation. That not only can they get that skill set and build that muscle of interviewing and media relations, but then they can use a link from that interview to then promote and fundraise for their own organization. What we're hoping we're doing, and history will tell us whether we did it or not, is really helping to grow their impact, to grow their storytelling, to grow their narrative. And as a whole, as an aggregate, from each of those individual stories, every single interview done from some of our media partners, both print, radio, and others, start to shift the conversation about the region in a way that uplifts optimism, that uplifts kind of the positive experiences that it focuses on struggle too, but doesn't let struggle define who we are and what we're about. So that's what we hope we are accomplishing through some of the narrative work.
Absolutely. So, Jesse, looking 5-10 years into the future with the Cielo Fund, how has the Cielo Fund transformed the narrative in the face of the Inland Empire?
It's a good question, Yvette. And I'm so busy trying to fundraise all the time, I've never thought about the long term, but I'm going to try and think this through with you. I think for me, success is, one, it outlives me, it outlives our committee, it becomes embedded in the fabric of the Inland Empire, so that when people think about Latinos in EIE, you think, oh, there's the Cielo Fund that's doing some interesting work. And that in turn means that our nonprofit grassroots organizations are getting the recognition they deserve. So that's one. Two, I think that for all the media partnerships that we're launching and that we've seeded, that the minute we step back or, we continue to partner and innovate in other ones, those continue regardless of our engagement, and they become staples in our community that we must have those programs institutionalized because they have had such an impact. And then on the research, I just think it's so powerful to be able to work with the top universities in California to really analyze and make better our communities. So I think what I'm hoping this becomes is it elevates the Inland Empire Community Foundation. It strengthens representation in philanthropy among Latinos, where they start to see themselves in philanthropy. A lot of folks, including myself, didn't know what philanthropy meant until very recently, and now I'm doing it, I guess, and trying to figure out how to move the needle. So I think that's one of the changes too. And then one of the things we did last year was look at nonprofit leadership and representation among Latinos in the region. So we did a whole report that looked at, okay, we're 52% of the region. What percentage of nonprofit boards are we on? Because those boards, they control a lot of resources and funding that go out into the community. We found that only 13% of the nonprofits that we evaluated have Latino board members, or that we make up 13%, I should say. And so we know there's a huge gap there. So we launched a program called Avanzar Leadership Program that actually trained about 15 local Latino leaders who wanted the experience and wanted to learn about how to serve on nonprofit boards, so that they can then apply for these boards and be a director on several nonprofits. So these are there's a lot of conversation in philanthropy about this term systems change, right? And so this is our way of understanding systems change, and our way of trying to change the system, which is to do research, do grants, do scholarships, do narrative change, and then to really do some leadership work so that people are seeing themselves represented and are stepping up to these roles.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jesse, for joining us today, sharing your tremendous work and your heart of service for the Inland Empire.
Appreciate it. And folks can go to iegives.org/Cielo Fund if they want to join us at our event on October 6th.
Perfect. All right. For everybody listening, don't forget to look for us on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Check out the Cielo Fund event. You don't want to miss it. In addition to that, a few other events happening, including AMPAC Business Capital, the DBA of AMPAC Tri-State Certified Development Company, in conjunction with the U.S. Small Business Administration and host of other partners, is hosting its 15th annual Faith-Based Small Business Summit, making the connection between faith and business on Thursday, October 17th in the city of Ontario from 8:45 to 3:30 p.m. For more information, reach out to Miss Hilda Kennedy at 909-915-1706 or email hkennedy@ampac.com for more information. Also, don't miss the Empire Strikers presenting USA versus Mexico in Major Arena Soccer at the Toyota Arena in Ontario on Sunday, September 29th at 1:30 p.m. Doors open at 12:30. Women's team will kick off at 1:30. Men's kickoff will occur at 4:30. Call 909-457-0252 for more information, or visit theempirestrikers.com for more information. Don't miss my interview with Josie Gonzalez, who has positively impacted the region for more than 25 years. Initially appointed as a City of Fontana Planning Commissioner in '96, became chair of the Planning Commission, and 2 years later mounted her first political campaign. You do not want to miss that. And next week, we will have Miss Stephanie Velasco. She is the General Secretary of Big West Rotaract. Rotaract clubs bring together people ages 18 and older to exchange ideas with leaders in the community, develop leadership and professional skills, and have fun through service. You do not want to miss it. We will see you all next week.